Hi, this is Patrick Boren. It is April 1st, April Fool's Day, but this is not a joke. It is coming from the Mercury News. They're on the West Coast and the Bay Area, and it's from John Wilner. And I just wanted to use this article and update as a point to demonstrate the real fear of the PAC folks truly believing that Oregon and Washington would vanish to the Big Ten. Um, Otherwise, why even talk about the point? So this article, the whole point of this article is to talk about the reason why it really doesn't benefit, especially if they're being given a lower share than USC and UCLA to go to the Big Ten. Well, that would be number one. If that was the case, it wouldn't be forever. And again, you still have security and exposure, and you still have more money even at a lower share than USC and UCLA. So that really doesn't bite into the situation. Wanted to talk about this question as well that they put into John Wilner. It says, is Apple the leader right now in buying the Pac-12 media rights? If so, which linear providers are they most likely to partner with? He responds, I cannot confirm Apple's position as a theoretical leader with any more certainty than I could confirm ESPN or Amazon. But the ongoing narrative on social media and in media reports about the Pac-12 opting for an all-streaming deal is wholly misguided in our opinion. There is zero indication the conference will place all of its football games on a streaming service. There will be a linear component, likely on ESPN/ABC. Even if Apple or Amazon purchased everything, the agreement would undoubtedly be a sub-licensing deal that placed football games on a linear platform. So the discussions that you've been hearing, like the Money Show, for instance, was talking about NBC and Peacock and all that. Well, if that was really the case, these other partners, then why wouldn't John Wilner be excited to talk about NBC as a linear partner? He doesn't even mention NBC. He still has Apple, Amazon, and ESPN in his discussions here. Here, clearly, John Wilner has not stated any other media partners. That's important to note. Here's another question about this article. It says, how low would Oregon and Washington go in terms of partial revenue shares to join the Big Ten, if the Big Ten comes a-calling? Why be a beta site for streaming college sporting events when you can be a junior member of the Big Ten? John Joseph asks. Your phrasing cuts right to the heart of the issue. Would Oregon and Washington accept being junior members of any conference? In my opinion, yeah. Now, why? Again, security. All right. Number two, eventually they will be getting, well, right off the bat, they'll be getting more money than the PAC. And sure, they lose the easier access to the CFP because they're going to be in a competitive conference. But that's it. He says we are highly skeptical, especially given the UCLA would have full membership. It means Oregon and Washington would be so proud as to say, well, if USC and UCLA are getting full membership, then clearly we're not joining the Big Ten unless we get full membership. No, I don't think they're that proud. I think that they would be willing to join for a lower number of years in order to gain membership now, even at a lower rate, which would still be worth more than what the PAC is showing here. So he says, let's say Pac-12 Commissioner George Kliavkoff presents a media deal to the schools worth $30 million per campus. He says, now we have seen zero indication that the Big Ten presidents are willing to expand again. Unless Notre Dame is involved, by and large, the campuses were never on board with adding more West Coast teams. That was Commissioner Kevin Warren's personal aim, and his public pronouncements on the matter were one reason he had so little internal support. But for the sake of this exercise, we'll presume the Big Ten comes to Oregon and Washington and offers partial shares at $35 million or $40 million a year. Is that enough to counteract the competitive disadvantage, again, from the playoffs point of view, that would come from switching conferences? Forgive the oversimplification, but it reflects the calculation. In a Pac-12 that had either 10 or 12 schools and lacked USC, the Huskies and Ducks would be competing with each other and Utah for the automatic CFP bid. In an 18 or 20 team Big Ten, they would be competing with USC, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and others for the automatic bid. Yes, access to the CFP's 6 at-large berths would have to be considered in both the Pac-12 and Big Ten, but those involve more variables. We believe the playoff matters a great deal to the Huskies and Ducks, particularly to a certain 85-year-old Oregon benefactor. Phil Knight wants to win a national championship. Okay, so let's include Utah in this discussion as well. If the Utes cast an eye to the future and expect college football to split into haves and have-nots in the 2030s, the best way to elevate the Utah brand and eventually become a have is to participate in the playoff. Well, let's talk about that. So if it's all about participating in a playoff, the Big 12 has a team that just participated in a playoff. TCU had a team last year that participated, now in the new Big 12, Cincinnati. I'm not sure that created haves and have-nots, because everybody knows that the haves are Big 10 and SEC is when it comes to money, and the have-nots is everybody else. So I'm not really sure that this argument is going to hold water. He says that's far easier in the Pac-12 without USC than it would be in a 14 or 16 team Big 12. Okay, so now he's just reduced Oregon and Washington to lesser than the Big 12. I mean, let's face it, he's saying that it's easier for Utah to get to the playoff in the Pac-12 without USC and UCLA than it is for Utah to get to the playoff in the new Big 12, minus OU and Texas. Amazing. It just, okay, I'll take it. Combine the psychological weight that comes from being a junior member. Psychological weight? What kind of leftist BS is that? Seriously? I mean, dude, you're in the Big Ten. You got more money already. You've got more exposure already. I mean, what? Psychological weight of being a junior member in the Big Ten with greater playoff access in the Pac-12. And there's strong case to be made for the Ducks and the Huskies staying right where they are. Alrighty then. Especially if the Pac-12 makes a smart move and creates a performance base that is unequal share distribution model for postseason revenue. Okay, I can understand you say, well, we made the postseason, so we should get more of the revenue. That we thank goodness we don't do that in the Big 12, but that's okay. That's, we like to share. Here's another question. He says, is there reason to believe that any Pac-12 schools have other legitimate options? Is the Big Ten willing to offer partial shares? Is the Big 12 able to offer full shares? Is independence an option for any school? We addressed the Big Ten piece above, and in the independent path isn't viable for any of the schools. The Big 12 option is available, but it would require some massaging. Another question here for John Wilner says, where do you believe the Arizona Wildcats end up? Are there any schools that could join the Pac-12 that would change the mind of schools that are considering leaving? As the hotline has noted repeatedly, the 2030s could bring seismic shift in the structure of major college sports. But for the near term, the most likely outcome for Arizona is membership in the Pac-12. And while there are no schools available that make the Pac-12 markedly more attractive, San Diego State's performance in the NCAA tournament certainly improves the perception of the Aztecs as a member. Basketball does not have the same impact as football, but it's not meaningless, especially with the loss of the tentpole program UCLA and the other benefits SDSU would bring with geography atop that list. Since they lost Los Angeles, might as well gain San Diego, I guess. Bottom line, perception matters, and the optics of adding SDSU have improved for the conference. And here's another question that's interesting. He says, is the faith and trust given to Commissioner George Kliavkoff and his team by the presidents, athletic directors, and media warranted? Seems his 21 months on the job are void of accomplishments in this field, but includes several gaffes. Kliavkoff was hired to usher the conference into a new era, with media rights agreement as the centerpiece. Ouch, well that hurt him. He was dealt a bad hand, and that's true. And then lost the LA schools, which he did not know was coming. Kind of like our conference. But the end game hasn't changed. If, big if, he crafts the media deal that keeps the conference together, the trust is warranted, although the specifics of the agreement would add nuance to the assessments. Of course, if it's more streaming, less money, there's a lot of nuance there. If he doesn't, the conference will cease to exist, he'll be out of a job, and his tenure will be deemed catastrophic. We continue to believe survival is more likely. So that's interesting that John Wilner thinks that if the deal causes teams to leave, that the PAC will cease to exist. I'm not sure if that's the case, but it depends on how many teams. I mean, if Oregon and Washington leave, and then the Four Corner schools leave, the PAC might continue to exist. I think it depends on how many teams, and I don't even know if they would cease to exist if they lost Oregon, Washington, and the Four Corner schools. Means that they would just be in a G6 conference, because either that or get soaked in by the Mountain West. At that point they would cease to exist. But I would think they would rather keep a name that holds more water, even though the PAC would no longer be a power conference, and whatever that really means, because the definition of power has become totally different than what it really means. People think power as well as the ones that make all the money and have all the exposure. That's not really the definition of a power conference. It has voting rights. That's the power conference. I can understand why different YouTube programs would bring up, I guess, discussions or rumors that are related to Pac-12 media partners. It makes sense if you're needing to keep hype to keep your advertisers happy and those kinds of things. But when I look at this article and I see John Wilner doesn't even mention any other media partners, that he would obviously, as a PAC supporter, would be extremely happy if the PAC had some linear partners like NBC, or even the other ones that others have promoted. So that's why I bring this article to you, to kind of bring people back down to earth on some things. It's clear. I mean, I would, if I was actually producing this program for money and had advertisers, I'd probably want to make sure that I had some hype. But the reality is there is no new news for the Pac-12 right now. There are no new partners. I mean, anything is open, it means. So everybody, from what we've been reading, still has a focus on Apple, Amazon, and ESPN. All the other ones are reaches. All the other ones are speculation. Just keep that in mind. I appreciate you guys listening. Please smash the like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you again soon. Take care.
Big 12 open for business. business.
There is no doubt the Big 12 is open for business. We will leave no stone unturned to drive value for the conference.